You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Yes.
I are.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Once again.
Into the breach.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about, before we started this, that you like your voice.
I like my speaking voice.
Yeah.
I've trained my speaking voice. When I was a young child, I had to take choir as a requirement in school, junior high. And we gave performances, like the Christmas concert or go out to the mall and sing, whatever. The music teacher told me before every performance, stand up there.
I know where this is going.
And lip sync. Do not sing because you cannot sing, and you will pull the whole section off. And I said, "You're the music teacher. Teach me to sing."
Yeah.
And she said, "That's beyond my skill set."
Beyond.
So then I moved into public speaking classes.
So that's funny to me.
It was funny to me.
Because I've had a similar experience when I was mine was with the church choir, but a very similar experience.
You're exuberant, but not good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet both of us have been tapped through no real seeking out of it on our own to be on radio, and been told that we have very good voices for radio. I think we sound good on
I've
this
been told
podcast.
I have a face for radio.
Yes,
Yeah.
both of us.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of amazing to me that both of us would have what we consider, and other people have told us, are very good speaking voices, and yet neither one of us can sing a lick. That's funny.
I would attest to that, yeah.
And, I've heard people who go on to these shows and that are about singing, and, they talk, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this person, I would never listen to this. And then they start singing, and it's angelic. So apparently there is no correlation between your speaking voice and your singing voice, which is weird to me.
That's always been my experience.
But how can that be?
Well, one example would be Mel Tillis.
Who stuttered. Anybody who doesn't know Mel had a horrible
speech impediment as a young man. He eventually
he got better at the end. Yeah,
but he continued to milk it for publicity's sake when he would
go on Johnny Carson and stuff.
Yeah, but what he learned as a stutterer with an extreme stuttering problem was that the breathing patterns, breath control, delivery mechanism were different if he sang as opposed to spoke. And so he learned to sing, and it was beautiful. But when he spoke, it was still irritating. So I'm the reverse of that. When I sing, my breathing patterns are really off, and my sound quality is terrible. But when I speak, it's seductive and harmonic and beautiful.
I'm just really, really surprised by that. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah. No, I am surprised that there is not a correlation between a person's speaking voice and their singing voice.
I'm just happy that I found a path forward.
There's somebody out there who is
would love
saying,
to hear me sing?
No. Yes, yeah. But no. Who's saying, oh, well, this is who knows the answer, and they're screaming it at their whatever device they're listening to this on.
Well,
and
get in touch with
if
us.
they know,
Sign
I was just going to
up.
say, contact us, because I would actually very much like to know what that rationale is.
Well, maybe you should go to a speech therapist or a song teacher. Maybe they could teach you.
Well, my choir teacher said, like you, that was beyond their skill set.
So my choir teacher in school was a teacher, not necessarily a musician.
not a music. Okay.
I know many people who teach music are also professional musicians, but a lot of them are just teachers.
So I just wanted to say that there is a lot going on with the show that I'm super excited about, that I am going to be really excited about giving out more details in the very near future. But in
Is this a teaser?
It is a teaser.
Okay.
But in lieu of you getting more information about those things today, what I'm really asking people to do is to demonstrate support for the show by going to Apple Podcasts and giving us a rating and leaving us a review, going to YouTube and subscribing to the show, having everybody that you know go on YouTube and subscribe to the show. Even do it for them if you want to. But there are things that are going to be happening in the very, very near future that I'm super, super excited about that I can't say anything about today, even though I'm saying this. And I can't wait to give you more details. But really, I just need for people to go out and demonstrate that support for the show.
If you subscribe to the show, you get a regular opportunity to say, do I want to listen to that? Does that sound interesting?
You can always turn it off.
You give it 5 minutes and you go, no, I'm not going to spend my time on that. But you give it 5 minutes, you could be like, wow, I never thought of that.
And there's going to be some exciting news on exactly that front coming up. And so again, I don't want to spill too much of the beans. Spill too many of the beans? I don't know.
Too many.
Yeah. But what I really am encouraging people to do is to demonstrate that support by going to Apple Podcasts and giving us a review and a ranking, and going to YouTube and subscribing and making sure that as many people as you can get
and as a
do that
clinician,
as well.
One of the conversations we regularly have with people is, why can't I get my mother-in-law to do this, or my sister to do this, or my boss to do this?
Do it for them.
So what we would encourage you to think about is perhaps your sister, your mother-in-law, and your boss would benefit from hearing our podcast. So you could subscribe in their name,
dulcet and
they would
mellifluous
receive
tones.
these productions and go, well, I don't know where that came from, but damn, it's good.
I'm so glad that it fell into my life.
Yeah, I'm going to make all my employees listen. Yeah.
There used to be a shampoo commercial, and you'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends.
That's the way it works.
Yeah. Do you remember the first person that you ever, let's just say, thought that you ever thought that you were in love with?
No.
No? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's...
Have you ever been in an unrequited relationship?
Yes.
Okay. I think most people probably can.
So when I was in high
associate with
school, I was on the debate team. And we did 2-man debate teams. Had to do positive and negative. We had to flip a coin, see which case we would argue. And I had assigned to me a partner who was incredibly beautiful girl. Very smart, very articulate, not aggressive, sweet. Butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. And so she was the first speaker, and I was the second speaker, because you want your stronger speaker.
You're the hammer.
You want the jerk to be the last guy up. But we won the state championship. I mean, and I was in love with her. And I made a pass at her and asked her if she would go out with me. And she laughed and said, no, we're debate partners. And that was the end of that conversation.
Wow.
So I don't know whatever happened to her. But
she felt good about being debate partners.
Oh, yeah, she wanted to win. She wanted the trophy. She wanted to win the championship. But she didn't want to go out with me.
Man.
Yeah.
She
wanted to use my skill sets.
Yeah, that's
and dispense with me. Yeah.
Rough. Well, she wanted to use the skill sets that she found to be advantageous to her.
Absolutely. Well, but we're all like that.
I know.
Yeah, I wanted to use her skill sets too.
You did.
She said no.
She was not into it though.
Yeah.
And so this idea for talking about this today came out of the radio. I heard a lot of information about this on the radio this last week, but the idea that today we have the ability to recognize the biological connections between our brain and our hearts more than we ever have. And while we've always talked about the idea of heartbreak, we've never really been able to track the biology of that, and now they have been able to start doing that, and I just find that remarkable. And the things that they talked about being associated with that.
Oh, this is so tailor-made for you.
were so different than what, like if someone had said,
No.
what is the biology of heartbreak?
You would have eventually gotten there. You'd have been
I don't
talking
know.
about the axons and the neurons and the dendrites and the
I would have.
metatarsal. Yeah, you would.
I would have,
That's where you always go.
but it wouldn't have been the same
Because
mechanism.
you want to reduce a human being down to those components. Let's get an MRI of your brain and see if you can bounce your checkbook. It's crazy. So they did this study.
Yeah.
They gave some people MRIs, and they had them think thoughts about dearly departed or disrupted relationships. And here, you think about your ex-wife for a few minutes in a longing, loving way, not in a gall darn her way at all. And we'll track where that shows up on your brain scan, and then we'll know some things about your brain. It turns out it tracks where rage tracks. It tracks where your passions are. It's like, oh, now we can map it, we can see it, and you fell in love with that.
But the first
What is it? The caudate
mechanism,
nucleus.
the caudate nucleus,
Yeah.
which is the same area that is the reward pathway for addiction.
So I get rewarded for thinking bad thoughts about my ex-wife.
You get rewarded for thinking loving thoughts about your ex-wife. Did you read the article?
I read the
you
article.
read it.
I'm fine with it.
But the idea of being addicted to love, which is something that people have said for a long time. Robert Palmer.
Yeah.
He did the song. But that is actually biologically a thing. That
It could be, yes.
the same mechanisms that are active in
So we talk about a reward
substance
path,
abuse.
which is where we go for drugs and alcohol consumption and sugar consumption and sex consumption and
And it applies right in a lot of different areas.
All right.
But it just was amazing to me that was one of the first things that they were able to visualize was the activation of this reward pathway. But what it means is, and more in a motivational kind of context, like I am motivated to see this thing repeated or continue. So more than just, oh, this feels good as a reward, it was a motivational path. And one of the things that really struck me about that is there a way to take that and use that or be able to apply that for other motivational opportunities? Yeah. Oh, I thought you were going somewhere.
Well, a couple things I thought about. 40 years ago, I remember reading about scientists who put an electrode in a mouse's brain in the orgasmic center of his brain, where he experienced sexual orgasm. And they put him in a box with two levers, and he could get a food pellet or he could get an orgasm by whichever button he pushed. He starved to death. But they think that he died happy.
Yeah. So when I was an undergraduate at St. Louis University, we did a similar study, but we were putting these electrodes in the brains of snakes to track their sleep patterns. And so we were undergrads, and we were really, really bad at this. So I'm not saying that we ever actually hit the sweet spot, but when we would...
Snakes died from sleep deprivation?
They would not sleep, but they got horny as heck. So I don't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
But we were doing something.
In a similar vein, talking about the reward pathways, I mean, how this is useful in therapy as a concept. I have a client that comes in. And it could be, and you have to kind of decide, and I was thinking about this as I read the article, are we dealing with grief? Like my wife dies, and I can't get her back. So I'm missing her, and I'm thinking all these wonderful things about her, and every time I look around, can I stay in this house because she painted that wall, and she bought that fabric, and she bought this couch, and I don't know that I could do that if my wife died. Flip side of that is I can never leave because this is the place I was here with her.
Yeah.
And this sustains me and gives me energy, and I feel her presence. So are we dealing with grief and loss, or if we're dealing with heartbreak? I come home and she says, "You don't live here anymore. The locks have been changed. Get out." And I'm devastated. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to go on in my life? And what does this mean? And what can I do to get her back?" And I keep looking at pictures that I have of her. And crying. My heart, my chest aches, and I'm stunned with whatever it is. And I remember 40 years ago advising people in this situation. One of the ways that you can break this logjam of painful entrapment over your loss is instead of looking at them with warm, positive memorializing, think of the ugliest place you ever experienced them. Think of your ex-husband drunk in bed in his underwear with a hole in his t-shirt and 3-day growth of beard and his breath reeking so bad you could barely stand it, putting his arms around you, wanting to kiss you, wanting to have sex with you. And are you attracted to him? Are you drawn to him? Is your heart beat faster? Are you like, oh joy, oh goodness, let's do this thing? Or are you like, oh, get away from me? And so when you are hit by this surge of loss and heartbreak and you're memorializing this relationship, instead supplant that, replace it with these horrible experiences. The thing that he said to you that was the most hurtful, hateful, the way you experienced him in his worst presentation.
So let's go to break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to pick that up.
All right.
You know, if you've gotten this far into the show, then obviously you find the show to be worthwhile, beneficial, maybe even helpful. And so I just wanted to say, if you've gotten this far into the show and you want to help us out, even if you don't want to help us out, just do it anyway. Go to Apple Podcasts and rate us and leave a review. That is super helpful. Subscribe to the show on YouTube and hit the bell icon so that you get notifications when new shows drop. That stuff is really, really helpful for us. And I know that Mr. Brett agrees.
Absolutely. Reviews are positive. Positive reviews are more positive, but negative ones are as well, because it helps you decide how to focus and how whatever you're intending to say is being heard.
And the secret is the algorithm doesn't care whether the review's positive or negative.
As our friend Mike Norton says regularly, feedback is a gift.
If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back, and the thing that you're talking about, so you were talking about grief and the connection between grief and this heartbreak, and you were also talking about, then taking that and supplanting that longing kind of feeling that you have with more of a polarized kind of a perspective. And I think that is exactly what was so surprising to me about the second thing that they found, which is that when you have heartbreak, you have an activation of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system simultaneously, which is very, very rare. That doesn't usually happen. But I think it also happens in grief. And I think the reason that happens is because you do have this Schrodinger kind of experiment where, the person is no longer a part of my life, but I want them to be a part of my life. And so that's going on, and you're giving your body two different messages simultaneously that's causing that to activate both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And what you're saying is you got to pick one. You got to activate one of those, and then that's going to help you to get through it.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I
think you are saying that without knowing it.
Okay.
But go ahead.
So a client comes to me and they say, I have a problem. I'm stuck. I hurt. I want to explore with them. What's the nature of the hurt? What are your options for getting unstuck? So that's not my judgment. I'm not saying to them, you must do this. I'm saying to them, if you want this outcome, these are paths by which you can reach it. Are any of them available to you? Can you see yourself choosing any of them? If not, you're going to sit here in this space and feel this way. And you've come to me to say, help me deal with this. So we deal with somebody that's dealing with grief and loss. We want to normalize that reality for them. What's the difference between a complicated grief reaction and just grief? And that's not to minimize grief, it's just grief.
I understand.
But you need to give it a little time. You need to allow yourself to feel these things some before you surface to get completion, to get resolution. So I would not encourage you to just avoid and block it in the initial moments of the grief experience. Over time, some of this will decrease. You can find memories that are affirming and nurturing, and you can let go of other memories.
Right.
But the oppressive sense of grief will diminish. But if I am not, whether it's grief or not, if somebody socially it's more acceptable, and a lot of times people that are in dysfunctional relationships and thinking about ending those relationships fantasize or dream about the death of the partner, because if my wife gets killed in a car wreck today, it's a lot better for me socially than if I fight her for a divorce. If we go through a divorce, we fight over stuff. We fight over money. We fight over relationships. Do you keep these friends? Do I keep those friends? Do you get to keep this activity and I keep this activity? I mean, we fight over all that stuff, and that can be aggressive and embittering and hurtful. But if you got killed, then everybody comes around and says, "Oh, you poor baby."
Right.
I get all the social support. I get all the money and all the stuff. So it's win-win for me.
And I just want to point out that we're talking real life here.
Very hypothetical,
Well, and people would, are sitting there, well, I would never.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you do. Yeah. And we know you do because we know what and we're not asking you to go out and tell all your friends that you do, but we understand that these are very normal, very natural.
Presentation.
And we're not judging anybody. It doesn't make somebody a bad person because they've thought those things.
It's so normal to think that way.
Right.
But anyway, so you have clients that come in and say, "Oh my God, I'm such a horrible person. This is what I thought," and you want to normalize that, and not as an encouragement, like, "Well, go home and electrocute them,"
right?
But to say, "You're not a bad person. That's not unusual or atypical. That's normal for these reasons."
Right.
So let's.
It would be easier.
Well, yeah.
I mean, just right up. It just straight up would be easier. Yeah. Now, obviously, we're not thinking that you're going to go out and cut the brake lines, but it is perfectly normal to have that feeling. But then once you get past it, once you've had that experience, then what do you do with that?
Yeah. And how do you get enough perspective or distance from the loss and the disruption, the heartbreak, to begin to breathe again and to pretend and begin to go forward? And so where we got into this conversation is I was saying, if I'm having that conversation with a client, these are things that I suggest to them that would be helpful, rather than continuing to wiggle a loose tooth to pull the tooth,
right?
To help get past this impasse where you're just trapped by the pain of the loss.
And so what are some of those things?
Seeing them in when you think of it, discipline your mind when they pop into your mind. Hear their voice in its ickiest format, and whatever it is. Hear them saying the most awful things you heard them say, or visualizing them in the most negative way that you can visualize them. Instead of like imagine them going to the toilet and calling you in to demand that you say or do something for them, where you're like, what are you doing here? Don't idealize their beauty, their softness, their connectedness. Remind yourself of all the very human negatives that you know.
And then if somebody says, well, but that feels disrespectful.
Well, how long do you want to hurt?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
it could be disrespectful.
It could be disrespectful, but are you wanting to get past this?
You are here because you feel trapped.
Yeah.
These are ways you can get out of the trap.
Right.
There are other ways. You can do this in a year. You can do this in 5 years. You can do this in a week. How do you want to do it?
And, just because you're doing these things, just because you're allowing yourself...
Well, you're not telling other people.
I was just going to say, you don't have to tell anybody that you're doing it. I mean, so if nobody knows that you're doing it, is it disrespectful? I don't know. I don't want to parse that out. I just feel like these are things that you can do to move past this feeling of being trapped. You say you feel trapped, which I understand. I understand.
And you know what? Truth be told, all of us have had, if we've had relationships, if we've been in marriages, there have been moments where our partner would approach us for some level of intimacy, and we would want to be able to say, do you mind going and brushing your teeth? Do you mind taking a shower?
Yeah.
maybe we're not able to say that.
Right.
But that's not the most sensuously addictive or attractive part of someone if that's blocking your participation. If there's a level of resistance or distance, whether you verbalize it or not. If you're off put, so I want to call that to your memory. I want to have you say, remember this about them instead of how nice they looked in their tux the day you got married. Instead of focusing on that or flipping through your photographs and finding a picture of last vacation that you took that was wonderful, the places where you went. Don't look at those and grieve them and relive the experience. Find something more negative. Look at the bass boat he bought that you hated. That he didn't have money to spend on a bass boat. You need a new washing machine. You had to fight over that.
Right.
Focus on those things and help yourself separate emotionally.
So why do you think that we tend to idealize those things rather than allow ourselves to remain focused on the because there were negatives, and yet
because the culture romanticizes love, and we romanticize loving relationships. They're all supposed to be perfect. No relationship is perfect.
Right, and if it's not perfect, then
except
it
when
must
I
be
am with my wife.
Of course,
she listens
that's
to
a
this.
given.
Yeah.
But so, do you think that the default for the human condition is that if the loving relationship isn't perfect, it is somehow my fault?
Well, that's what we're taught.
Yeah.
What are you doing wrong?
Right. And I think that is exactly what we're taught. And that's one of the things that I really want to challenge in therapy is that concept of what a loving relationship is not only wrong, it's destructive. Don't teach your children that love is perfect.
Oh, that's interesting.
Teach your children that love is real.
All right.
And we could start to lay the foundation for not having that fantasy narrative. But I agree with you. I think that we are taught that. I think we are deliberately taught that love is perfect.
When I was teaching counselors to become counselors, one of the things that I would say every semester for 30 years that I did that, as a clinician, you need to know country music. You don't have to like it. You don't have to appreciate it. But you need to know it because every client that you will ever see is in a country song somewhere. So are you suggesting that we should teach our children to know country music?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm suggesting that we teach our children that love is a real human process and not a fairy tale. Now, obviously, the reason we don't is because the destabilization of the nuclear family to a child is an existential crisis. And I'm not saying that we have to create anxiety in them, but I think it is okay.
I don't love your mommy anymore, and if you don't behave, I'm not going to love you anymore.
Yeah.
Is the message they hear.
Is the message they hear.
Yeah.
And we go to great pains to argue not around the children. And I would even say to clients, especially in parenting situations, I don't want you to disagree in front of the child. I want you to disagree in private all
Except
you want to.
the kids always know.
But the kids know.
Parents will come in and say, "Oh, we've been fighting like cats and dogs," but the kids don't know. And I would say, "Yes, they do.
Yes,
they
sure
know.
they do.
They feel. They live in a house. They feel the atmosphere. I could feel it when I would go home as a child. I mean, I would open the front door and not see a soul. I know it was a bad day to be home.
Right.
It permeates the atmosphere.
And so then is it better for the child to fill those blanks in through their own fantasies, or is it better? No, it's better for you to be upfront.
But you have to be able to discuss it in a non-damaging, accusatory way.
Sure.
I can't. I don't pull my 7-year-old in and say, "Your mommy's a bitch," and I'm really fighting with her because she's a bitch. What I do is say, grown-ups fight. People fight. Mom and I are arguing about something, but we love each other. We'll work this out. It'll be fine. We still love you, and it'll be fine. And if you get to the point of a divorce, then you have to say the same thing. We have decided that it will be better for us to not live together anymore, but we're both going to live in terms of loving you. And we want access to you. We want to be involved with you. We're going to support you. The challenge is getting them to do that.
Right.
Because so often, as a counselor, you dealing with those family situations that are dissolving,
Right.
where the parents are using the kids as weapons
Sure.
for their agenda.
And
you
one
fight
parent-
that battle every day. Like, you can't do this. It's not good to the kids. You're
And
a parent.
one parent might want out, and the
Yeah.
other parent might not.
Yeah.
And then that's a
Oh, yeah.
mess.
We're going to starve to death because your dad's an SOB. And he's chasing after that new blonde bimbo. And he spent all his money on her. So you can't go to summer camp. You can't join the Boy Scouts. We can't buy you new shoes. It's all your dad's fault. You know, if they say those things to the child, that is so destructive of that relationship and the potential of the relationship for the child with the dad. So as a clinician, you have to try to teach them how to separate themselves out without damaging their children.
Right.
They're still co-parents. And it's a huge uphill battle.
Yeah. And so we, started this out talking about the heartbreak of the individual. We ended up talking about the dissolution of marital ties, which I think are all a part of the same thing. But, I think that the message is, don't let your pain become your children's trauma.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes.
As a parent, that is a message that I always want to consistently
and there
send.
are ways to manage your pain
Absolutely.
that are healthier
Yes.
and less damaging.
Absolutely. And if
More
you don't know what those are, go talk to
there.
somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully that is helpful for people. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. Again, we are really encouraging people to show us some support by going to Apple Podcasts and reviewing the show and leaving a rating. And definitely go to YouTube and subscribe to the Psych with Mike channel and get as many people as you can to do the same. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.